It didn't lead me to that so much as it led me to wanting to be a member of the House Armed Services Committee. You know, having grown up in the Air Force, I felt a familiarity with the nature of service, at least for families. My predecessor, Congressman Marty Meehan, had been on the committee, and with his departure, Massachusetts needed a representative in the House. It was a committee that I felt needed more diversity. There weren't a lot of women serving on the House Armed Services Committee. And while we don't have a lot of bases, we value those that we do have. They have extraordinary impact economically on the Commonwealth, but also they provide real cutting edge approach to the kind of challenges we face across the globe and how we best defend our country. So for a whole host of reasons, I sought it out. And then once there, very early on, serving on the Military Personnel Subcommittee, which oversees all the issues affecting those serving and their families, had a hearing in which 4 generals were up there testifying about their efforts to deal with sexual assault. And I had to say I was sort of taken aback that it was such the issue that this hearing suggested. And then really maybe within the next month, I went to a Wounded Warrior luncheon that was held in the Capitol, went into a room full of primarily men who'd been seriously injured, and learn more about what their experience is. But then there were maybe 2 or 3 women in the room. So I made my way over to them, as I was the only female member in that room, with the female congressperson in the room at that time. Went over to them just to see what their experiences were. And then in the course of my conversation, I said, we just had this hearing on sexual assault in the military. I said, is it as serious as that hearing would suggest? And one of the women, a nurse who'd been deployed a good number of times, both to Afghanistan and Iraq, said, "Ma'am, I'm more afraid of my own soldiers than I am of the enemy." And to protect herself, she always carried a knife in her waistband. So she'd never been assaulted. She was constantly on the alert, though, for the possibility. And I have to say that resonated with me in a way I could never have anticipated. I would never have known when I sought out the Armed Services Committee that this would be an issue that I would stay focused on throughout my tenure. But like so many things, once you're elected, you learn about things you wouldn't normally do out in your civilian world, and you make choices as to whether or not you want to try to do something about it. And so, having learned it and heard her story, it really stuck with me and has guided me, I think, throughout my tenure. One of the issues we learned about was the deep fear that those who've been assaulted have had of coming forward, and it was rooted in lots of different things. It was rooted in the attitude of superior officers, so often discounting the stories. It was rooted in if the unit became aware of these allegations, there was often serious retaliation against those who were coming forward. The Uniform Code of Military Justice really was not well attuned to dealing in a fair way with these kinds of charges. So for a whole host of reasons, reporting really was not what it should be. And anonymous surveys really showed that the incidence of these crimes were much higher than the reporting would suggest. So a lot of our effort has been around dealing with those different elements of it. So whether it's better training commanding officers to know how to deal with these kinds of issues, whether it's putting in place resources that help support survivors who come forward so they don't feel so at sea, both in terms of the legal process, but also in terms of all the care that is needed. Doing a better job of educating the service members in general around sexual harassment and sexual assault and working to prevent it, and seriously reforming the Uniform Code of Military Justice so that these crimes are dealt with in a much more even-handed way. And all of that was designed to encourage reporting so that people would come forward. So it's hard to really know if these higher numbers are reflective of that. I'd like to think so. I'd like to hope so.